we're joined by Matt Heinz here from Heinz Marketing, well-authored contributor and publisher for such notable books as Full Funnel Marketing, Sales for Startups, and Modern Marketing in the Field Guide. So Matt, thanks for joining us for our Insight with the Experts series. Appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having me.
You and I chatted a little bit last week, and we started kind of going over kind of 4 buckets of what we're looking to accomplish today. Pain points from the CMO's view, what they're feeling and what's going on. I think measurement and data is always going to be really, really relevant. So that's going to be one of our topics. The marketing funnel, which I think you're kind of the industry expert there on kind of how to address that, especially from kind of today's sales force. And then more trends. I want kind of the viewer to get a sense of what you're seeing out there. I know you're talking to a lot of CMOs. Your target audience is pretty similar to what we're looking at with the B2B and the B2C side. So if that sounds good, we'll probably launch into some things now.
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay, great. It's interesting what's happening with the CMO and their pain point. They're tasked with a lot of responsibility from sales, revenue generation, more customer experience, driving conversion. I think that all is going to put a little bit more pressure on them for defining KPIs. Mm-hmm. But it kind of goes back to the buyer and the seller and the relationship they have, how the buyer still controls a lot. What does that look like now for the marketer as they get into the engagement side? Does the buyer really want that much personalization from the marketing teams?
It's a really interesting question. And I love that you actually sort of couch everything sort of around what the buyer needs. I think it's really easy for sort of modern marketers and especially modern CMOs to start thinking about, okay, how do I contribute to my organization's success? How do I start to measure my results based on business metrics, not marketing operational metrics? But the way you couch it, I like a lot, because at the end of the day, none of it really matters unless you're providing value to that customer. So, what is that value? How are you measuring that? How is the customer measuring that? How do they value that relative to all the other things they're trying to achieve? And how are you best communicating and creating that value for the customer in the environment that exists today that may be different than the environment that exists for that customer 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. So I think from that standpoint, there aren't enough marketers and aren't enough CMOs that really are embracing their role as the champion of the customer.
Right.
Your job is not to optimize landing pages and Facebook ads, right? It's not just to generate, revenue for the organization, although highly important. You're not going to do that unless you've actually created value for the customer. So, playing that customer champion role, really driving home an understanding of the personas of the people you're selling into, knowing that you can't create a persona around an organization. Say, okay, we've got these target accounts we're going after. Well, that's fine, but buildings don't write checks, right? So inside a complex B2B company, CEB now says there's 6.8 people on average involved in the internal buying committee to make a decision. Well, how well do you understand who those 6.8 people are? Right. What roles do they play? What approaches do they bring to the table? They're different from each other. And then how do you build consensus amongst them around the need for a product like yours while still creating value for their organization? Answering those questions continues to get more and more complicated, but successfully answering those questions unlocks the ability for marketers to truly create value for their own organization.
So how do you deal with those marketers that are faced with limited resources? They are either operating on a shoestring budget or, they are a skeleton crew, wearing multiple hats, and they don't have the right level of resource to put that content in front of that buyer to get them to a path to purpose, engage, purchase, and wherever else we're talking about.
A lot of this doesn't start with a software technology stack. This doesn't start with, how many marketing channels do I have access to, do I have budget for? This starts with how well you understand your buyer and how well you can communicate with them. So, I got a question a couple weeks ago. Someone says, so what's the minimum technology stack to do modern marketing today? And my answer was the telephone, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you fundamentally understand the complexity of the buying environment you're selling into, if you understand those different roles that people have, and you understand the nuances of how to communicate with them, if you have one salesperson, you teach them the difference between those different roles. You teach them how to have those different conversations. And even then, if you have no resources but one sales guy,
Yeah.
You can customize that conversation and hopefully create more resonance between your message and their needs, which helps you get a lot further along in the process. So yeah, I mean, if you had more budget, then maybe you could hire more salespeople to do that. If you had more budget, you could hire more tools that could automate the beginning of that conversation so the reps come in the middle. But you can do a lot of this through hand-to-hand combat to start with that can at least give you some proof of concept, can demonstrate to yourself and the organization that this works, and it gives you more confidence to then go and say, hey, listen, I think, it's time for us to invest in greater resources because we know that this process works. If we could automate and or scale it, think about the impact it could have for us then.
What kind of advice can you give the head of marketing out there as they're thinking about either re-engineering or adding more value into their existing infrastructure with the pressure that they're facing on the customer and buyer side?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I don't think a lot of marketers have thought about it that way. So if you were to step back and say, independent of just having people run campaigns, what are the roles that I need? There's a couple roles that I would point out, and this isn't exhaustive, but there are a couple roles that I don't see very often that I think would help. One is it really is a product marketing manager that really champions understanding of the customer. Someone in the organization needs to own the personas, not only creating them, but maintaining them. And then ensuring that those personas are used by every customer-facing department. Make sure that the personas are embedded in the way the sales team trains and creates their systems and their playbooks and their messaging. You want to make sure that those personas are built straight into the products that you're building and the features that you're prioritizing.
Right.
And clearly it's got to feed into the marketing you're doing as well, your content strategy, your offer strategy, how you're engaging those prospects on a regular basis. So that's critically important. So one is that sort of that voice of the customer, which I think operationalizes in a product manager type role.
Right.
Two is someone that has an active role in sales enablement. I think, modern marketing really needs to embrace the idea that you're not done when the lead is generated, that you're done when the lead is converted. So I'm excited that more marketers are embracing their role all the way through the process. So sales enablement means content, process, tools. What can you do to make the sales team more efficient and more effective?
Right.
Increasing conversion of your opportunities into closed deals. And the third one is someone in a sort of a marketing operations role that is not only going to be able to help manage your marketing technology systems, but help think through the processes that you're developing as you identify things that work, things that are repeatable and scalable. What are the best ways, not necessarily to automate those,
right,
but to create the most efficient means possible to follow that process every time. So I think those are three areas of focus
Yep.
that I think many marketers really haven't put a focus on before that I think can really drive success and scale moving forward.
The way you've just kind of described that is it's spot on and very helpful. But that also starts to open up more bridges for the CMO to build. The CMO and the CIO were coming closer together a year or two ago, where the CMO and head of IT now need to start to come together. Or like, as you look at it and you start to counsel a CMO, is that, let's say it's a newly appointed CMO and they're coming into this fresh organization, mid-market company, what are the top department heads that they need to start to bridge those conversations and relationships with stronger?
Well, I don't know. I think you could make a case, back in the history of time that sales and marketing should be tied at the hip. I don't know that they really ever have at scale. And I think that you still see a lot of marketers that want to work independently. They figure, I want to own what I can control. And it's hard to partner with an organization that isn't necessarily aligned with the way I think. So it doesn't always work very well, but I would say day to day, that's the most important sort of cross-functional relationship that you have. The other relationship that I highly encourage marketers to spend a lot more time focusing on is with finance. I think that too often we go we go to finance as marketers and we ask for more money and we don't really have a good reason why we need it. We can't really justify it in business reasons. So when we get turned down, we say, well, they're just being cheap. It's like, well, prove that you've got something of value. I think your relationship with finance in marketing, your ability to create confidence with the finance team that you're thinking about the business, that you're thinking about marketing as a profit center, and that you're measuring yourself that way, that you're creating a culture in your marketing organization to focus on things that make money for the company. that's going to unlock, we were talking earlier about resources and about not having resources. And, that's going to unlock the opportunity to go make a case and quickly get what you need to be successful.
How do you guide today's kind of modern marketer to convince that head of finance that it's just not all a tactical measurement, but from you mentioned profit center, typically they're like, dollar out, dollar in, but what model should they be going at?
Well, I think there's measurement and accountability is important. And there's a couple ways to think about that. If you are reporting on the efforts of your campaigns based on activities and not showing a line to revenue, then they don't get what you're talking about, and they think you're just snowing them the way they think your share of voice conversations used to snow them when they don't know what the hell that means. So I think being able to separate your operational metrics from your executive dashboard metrics, meaning the metrics that demonstrate the revenue impact of your work, becomes really important. And I think that your ability to go to finance and not only demonstrate a line between what you're doing and revenue, but also communicating that it's not always going to be that clean. So yes, you are going to want to invest in marketing that generates awareness and consideration and intent that isn't going to immediately and directly lead to sales. And there are some great software systems that can help you with those early stage attribution once you get down to close deals. But making sure you're on the same page with the complexity of the system, but then helping them understand how those early stage marketing efforts lead to greater conversion, greater effect at the bottom of the funnel, can help get them on the same page.
Great. You've been a huge advocate for the marketing funnel and the sales funnel. And let's start at the top, Matt, and let's think about what's the funnel look like today versus, what it looked like 5 years ago. How has it changed? How has it evolved? And what do marketers need to kind of take away from or add or start to perfect in their overall approach to, call it any type of funnel, sales to marketing, marketing to sales?
Yeah. Well, the funnel's still alive and kicking. I think a lot of people may want you to think that the funnel is dead, that prospects don't follow this linear progression. And rarely do they in general, but we need to use a model for something, right? And I think in general, thinking about stages of the buying journey still makes sense. I'm going to say some contradictory things, but hopefully they make sense together. So on one hand, I think the funnel is wider than it's ever been, meaning at the top of the funnel, we're now able to engage prospects at scale throughout your entire addressable market with good value-added content, where the first stage of your buying journey together might be attention. Do I have your attention based on something that you're interested in?
Right.
So from that standpoint, the top of your funnel is your entire addressable market. And then you start to narrow people on are they engaged? Are they qualified? Yada, yada, right?
Yep.
I know we'll talk about account-based marketing a little later, but Craig Rosenberg, who's one of the co-founders of Topo, he says, funnels are alive and kicking in ABM. They're just a lot smaller. They're a lot tighter, right? Instead of being wider, they're just I only care about these companies now. So from that standpoint, if you're doing sort of target account selling, you don't care about inbound marketing. You're not going to wait for your target prospect to stumble upon your blog post on Google. You know exactly who they are. You know exactly those 140 companies. You know exactly the 8 people in each of those companies that you want to address. Those are the people at the top of your funnel. It's a much narrower funnel than it otherwise would be.
Now, does that become a value point to the discussion, back to the bridge of finance over to marketing? Because as you look at either ABM, named account strategy approach, you're able to kind of further define, narrow down that focus and value and impact you can have to the top brands that you're looking to penetrate with that marketing, resource and spend.
Yeah, and I think to an extent, when we take that first funnel, right, where the top stage is sort of that, the entire addressable market, and your job is to generate awareness. Let's start a little more precise than that. Let's find the organizations that actually have the characteristics that make them more likely to engage with us. What's going on in their company, either from the individuals or from the company, that are buying signals that may be more subtle, passive buying signals, but are buying signals nonetheless, that tell us that they might be interested in engaging. They might be open to a challenge the status quo conversation, which is phase 1, according to serious decisions of that buying journey, right? So I think if you can say, listen, we have a precise sort of scientific way of thinking about this buying journey. Here's how it maps to the way we're marketing to people. And to get the qualified people at the beginning of this conversation, we don't need to market to the entire market. We need to market to the right segment of the market based on these criteria. All right, based on these signals from the market and from individual companies. You can see those signals across the web in things they're saying on social channels. You can see it in financial disclosures. You can see it in investor call transcripts, right? I mean, all these different places that you can mine for these buying signals. And then the next day, I mean, literally forget things. You can say, okay, sales team, here's 4 people that yesterday in their company's investor calls mentioned that they now have a corporate priority to do X. Go ask your target what their plan is to help achieve that goal, right? So that goal went from, number 24 on their priority list to number 2 because their CEO just mentioned it on an earnings call.
Right.
The next day, they have no plan for that.
Right.
You're a hero because you now have an opportunity to help them, have a plan for that today.
What happens when you have maybe a legacy sales force that's just accustomed to doing one thing and only one thing, and you have a marketing department that is so advanced, leveraging data, looking at all the listening and kind of analytics out there and getting ahead of what that strategy is? I mean, I think it's a really hot topic to address because, I think there's a lot of transformation happening in sales and marketing.
Yeah, so rarely, if ever, do we see an organization where you've got marketing that advanced and sales that traditional, because what usually happens is as marketing is increasing their level of sophistication, it's being done in an environment that is supporting that, not just at the marketing executive level, but at the company executive level that is also looking at, okay, sales, how are you stepping up to do this? I don't think modern marketing works without sales being involved, right? If you've got a high level of sophistication and execution on marketing, sales is at the table, right? If they're not, you literally as a marketer can't do it.
Does that mean as advocacy and loyalty and the experience of the customer becomes more relevant in the funnel effort? And for now, we don't have to think of funnel just based on pre-sale. There's a lot of emphasis on, a funnel and an engagement. Does that kind of help sales trust marketing a little bit more because marketing is inherently kind of looking at the customer far more strategic than it ever has?
We work with a lot of, marketing organizations that are tasked with driving demand for sales, but we also then work with a lot of sales organizations that are taking that demand, trying to bring it home. And, the vast majority of them, like you put them in a safe room by themselves where they're not going to get quoted. They're like, yeah, no, I still am on my own, man. I mean, I'm still, I'm trying to close deals. And most sales organizations are not compensated based on lifetime value, based on best customer profile. They're compensated based on hitting this month's number. Yeah, I mean, they'll talk about, we want the right customers, we want the lifetime value, and like we're going to increase compensation for bringing on customers we think are best profile, and that's it's all fine and good. But that's not what the reps are compensated on either. The reps are compensated for bringing on deals, right? So there's still some work to be done there. But I love that you bring up lifetime value because it reinforces the idea that not every customer is equal. And so from a marketer's standpoint, if we tell our marketers that you are tasked with generating marketing qualified leads, they will go generate those by whatever means necessary, right? And they will optimize everything they're doing based on getting the most marketing qualified leads at the lowest average cost.
Right.
Well, not every lead's equal. Some leads are going to convert better than others. Some customers are going to stick around longer than others. So if you understand who are my best, longest, most profitable customers, shouldn't you be willing to spend a lot more money to acquire them? Because you expect that they're going to stick around a lot longer and make you a lot more money. The answer should be yes. And yet if you're focused on a more tactical early stage metric without any looking at close, let alone lifetime value, you're not allowing your marketing team to optimize for that.
Does that then push the issue of redefining MQLs? Just based on kind of the dynamic of how either the funnel is shifting, changing, or being impacted?
I think it probably changes the way that you think about, sales qualified leads as opposed to marketing qualified. It just depends on how you define all these things, right? I mean, everyone's got kind of a different definition of what's a contact, what's an inquiry, what's a marketing qualified lead, what's a sales qualified lead. At a certain extent, look, I mean, I think about, your newsletter, I think about your blog, I think about, your ability to drive attention. The number that you want to engage on that is a very, very large number because, listen, if someone comes in and you don't have to spend money to acquire them and they're just willing to sort of fall into the fishing net, fine, right? Because you spent that attention building awareness with them and it costs you no more to do it with them than a bunch of other people. So then you start to say, okay, like who is it worth my marketing operations efforts triaging? Mm-hmm. So use Marketo as an example. You're going to spend money on Marketo based on how many people are in Marketo's database. Mm-hmm. right? I'm a B2B marketing consulting firm. We focus on, mid-market B2B companies. There are companies outside of that our primary definition in B2B that we will do work for. If they come to us, we're not going to go out and pitch them, right? Marketo, you're going to spend money with Marketo based on the size of your database. Who's worth being in that database, right? If I'm going to have a salesperson spend their finite time, there's an opportunity cost of them calling this prospect.
Yep.
I think many marketers will consider an MQL someone that fills out a form and that showed interest in their webinar, right? So there's, as you start spending incremental dollars on your marketing and especially on your sales, there's a higher opportunity cost of not focusing on the right people.
Right.
And so it's important for marketers to think about that.
Yeah.
And to make sure you're making highest best use of time. And if you have to do that in a non-scalable way to start, that's fine. I realize that this is a process and a way of thinking that a lot of marketers haven't gotten into yet. So feel free to crawl and walk into this. But the goal is to create those processes and systems and checkpoints so this can scale for you moving forward.
So it kind of leads to our next section on kind of more measurement and data and kind of how every company is striving to be data driven. And what does it mean for a CMO to be data driven? There's the analytics. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but what are some of the other things
I think before you can be effectively data driven, you have to be money driven. So I think understanding, I go back to the idea of, having your marketing organization operate as a profit center, knowing that, your responsibility is to generate revenue for the organization, and filtering your decisions based on that. Now, not everything's going to be a direct correlation. Most companies aren't working in a one call close transactional model, but being disciplined around measurement starts with knowing what you need to measure, and that starts with knowing the end goal is sales and revenue. So again, I think it's okay to separate your operational dashboard from your executive dashboard. I mean, ultimately, you can't manage marketing unless you are improving open rates of emails, unless you are trying to get more yield out of your spend on Facebook ads. And I mean, those things still happen as part of marketing, but it doesn't work super well unless you're doing those things focused on the right financial outcome.
If you had a guide a marketer today, what are some of the top 3 or 4 triggers they should be looking at right now to measure that impact?
That's a great question. I think it's going to be your approach is going to be different for different prospects based on the type of content they're interested in and the channels they're interested in. I don't see a lot of C-level executives reading 20-page white papers. It's probably not a format you're going to get them interested in. They're not attending 60-minute webinars in the middle of the day.
Right.
So I think you got to think about that's another, the better you understand the persona, the better you're going to create not only the topic of content they care about, but the format and channel that they're most likely to engage in. I don't think it's fair to also say that we need to look for like a silver bullet of something that's going to work. I tend to think of this as a body of work exercise versus sort of a point in time exercise. If you're able to sort of, focus what you're doing, knowing that the CEO isn't going to watch a 60-minute webinar. They're probably not going to read a 20-page white paper, but maybe they'll delegate something to someone on their team. So if you know that they see something in the split second, they may forward it to their CMO or their VP marketing, say, hey, you should check this out. What does that change about the content you put in front of them, the approach, how easy you make it to forward? If you want them specifically, it better be worth their time. It better be short. It better be impactful. If you go to salesforce.com and you say, hey, what's your best channel for engaging enterprise IT executives? Their answer is dinners. They go to every market and they find the best restaurant in town and they invite 30, 40 people. 70% of the room is prospects, 30% is customers and partners. And yeah, they've got a conversation they want to facilitate, but they mostly just let those people talk.
Yeah.
And so, you understand the audience, that that's a starting point. Now, are you going to bring a stack of POs to have them sign while they're there? No.
Right.
Are you going to do a demo on a PowerPoint deck and with a projector in the middle of the steakhouse? No. But that's the beginning of the process. That might actually earn you the next call. The output of that might be that they actually request that their people sit down with you for 30 minutes to hear what you have to say.
Right.
And in that conversation, you still might not pitch what you're doing. It might be all about industry trends, and here's how things are changing in your industry, and there will be winners and losers, and which side do you want to be on? Mm-hmm. So it gives them something to think about. It's that first stage of the buying journey according to Serious Decisions, which is challenge the status quo. And you don't need to get someone to commit to change or commit to buy at that point. You simply need to get them to say, Hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah.
I should learn more, right?
Yeah, right.
And that brings to the next conversation.
Yeah.
Your ability to influence the CIO pales in comparison to the internal buying committee that could build consensus and internally tell that CIO what they should do. So even though you want to talk to the CIO first, your best, most efficient means of getting that deal may be to talk to someone 2 levels down in the organization that is facing the problem, that has influence in the organization, that can rally the internal group around a problem and a potential solution that they then together take to the CIO. Quick example of that is, I know we'll talk about ABM. There's a lot of people in organizations that care about ABM, that think ABM is interesting. But, ABM done right is an organizational change, right? It is not a marketing function. It is a cross-functional effort. Sure. So sales has to be on board. The executive team has to be on board supporting it. The CFO has to be on board funding it. So, we've actually, with another company, developed an internal ABM sales guide that says, okay, here's the different roles of the organization that might care about this. Here's a draft PowerPoint deck you might use to communicate this to them. Here's an ROI calculator you can take to the finance director that says why this is important. So, that kind of a internal selling kit, so to speak, is something that most marketers will want to develop for those complex selling environments to make sure that you're effectively rallying the group to be organized to buy.
Perfect. It's going back to the conversation on the CIO 2 levels down, maybe one of your key targets that you need to kind of get engaged with. Doesn't that put more emphasis on kind of a really good smart content marketing program? Because your content now is starting to kind of alter and change based on who the title is, what their role happens to be, what type of information they may be gathering.
I've seen consistent stats that show that 80 to 90+% of content for sales goes unused. And there's a variety of not so good, but rational reasons for that. And I think a lot of companies, their answer has been like, well, we need to create less content. Let's just create less content. That's not necessarily the answer. The answer in many cases might be you actually need more content. You need precise content for the right individual at the right time based on their stage of the buying environment.
Right.
And that is in many cases more content. So the job is not to create less content. The job is to help the sales team more effectively get to the content they need. It's getting the right content to the right person at the right time.
Right.
So, marketing automation tools can help with that. There's a number of really good content management tools that can certainly help with that on the sales side. Even if you don't have those tools on the sales side, like having a consistent, understood, trained system for how content is organized and accessed, and have that reinforced and improved upon over time, like that can help as well.
Yeah.
Also making sure that the sales organization knows how to use that, knows why they need it.
Right. If you're not a great storyteller, then how are you going to help drive sales to make their mark if you're not telling, at the right time of engagement, that story that buyer is specifically interested in? Because as you've said, we have all these tools in front of us that we should be able to see the triggers of, what that buyer is kind of engaging with and interested in. So does it come down to something as simple as be a great storyteller?
Yeah, I think so. I think everything we've talked about so far, I mean, I could argue until the end of the day that it's super important, but it all relates to telling a story that your customer believes. Telling a story that makes them interested enough to want to learn more. And that story isn't about you, and it's not always sort of it's not about closing the deal. In many cases, it's simply getting them to think differently about the world around them. You introduce new information, you introduce a new trend, and you help them start to think about what's the impact of that trend on you, on your business, on your industry, on your number, your objective, your bonus this year. That's storytelling as well. And so I think that it's an important point you bring up, and it's easy to get lost in improving your open rates and, getting more out of your Facebook ads. And, I think the move towards math marketing and revenue marketing, while I love it and evangelize it, you run the risk of losing the importance of great storytelling. Marketing will always be an art and a science. And I think good marketing begins and ends with science. So you know what you're trying to achieve and you measure whether you got there. But the art's not going away, and the, what you put in your campaigns, what stories you tell that creates emotion and interest and movement among those prospects is exceedingly important.
I agree 100%. I think we're seeing that in our client base, quite honestly. Our marketers are challenging us, selecting us, staying with us due to the fact that, we're evolving their story and doing the right one. It's integrated across their department. I think that what's been great about what's happened in the market with the marketing function over the last 2 years is where maybe 2 years ago we were talking about siloed efforts and, these departments not really communicating and integrating with each other. I don't know about you, but I've seen silos drop, a lot of great collaboration amongst the marketing departments, for the common goal of whether it's revenue, sales, brand awareness. I think that conversation's pretty much left. And now we're moving more towards, whether it's data, whether it's everything we're going to be talking about in the trend section here on ABM, but you would agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. And I think, look, I mean, this stuff is not getting easier. I think marketing is going to, if anything, it's getting harder just in terms of the sophistication of our prospects, the complexity of the buying journey, the complexity of the systems and channels and messages that we're using along that to drive people. But in that complexity, I think we increasingly have data and tools that make it easier for us to see what's working and to be able to make better decisions. So I think it's an exciting time.
I do. I thought maybe we could end our great conversation today around more of the trends. I know, we're hearing a lot about a few different things, right? ABM is definitely becoming more relevant in a lot of the conversations that we're having and a lot of the stuff that you're talking about out there. We're also hearing, a lot, and I want to get your reaction on it. Funnel's dead. Inbound marketing's old school. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts there.
Anytime I hear that something is dead, I just assume that whoever told me that is trying to sell me what is apparently now alive. Let's take inbound as an example, right? No one had heard about the term inbound. That did not exist until HubSpot coined it, right? I mean, they created a whole culture around it. They created a conference of tens of thousands of people around it. They've done an amazing, brilliant job at creating that industry.
Agreed.
To the point where there are people that were saying it's all about inbound. You don't have to do anything else. You just get everybody to come to you. Tell that to the sales manager who owns 140 accounts, who only is doing target account selling, who has a set of named account reps that only care about having conversations with X number of prospects. You go and tell them how much you love inbound marketing, how you're going to wait for that prospect to show up on Google and download something off of your blog post, right? The majority of our pipeline as a business has, I would argue, come from inbound marketing. We do a lot of content. We do a lot of social. We generate a lot of inbound. But I don't have control over quantity and quality for my inbound. If I simply try to run my business purely on inbound, then I'm going to have a random scattered business doing all kinds of stuff that I may or may not want to do. If I want to focus my efforts, then I have to subsidize that inbound with outbound, right? I mean, I think that, and the lesson for me is that, there is no one or the other. There's no all inbound. There's no all ABM. You look at your business, your audience, your culture, and figure out what's the right mix to hit your number, and that mix may change over time.
Gotcha.
But there's no silver bullet that is going to drive your business for the foreseeable future.
Right. So flexibility, agility is going to be important from a marketer's view as they come into, whether we look at 2017 and beyond, that there may, like you said, there may be no perfect silver bullet for it. You've got to be able to adjust based on the dynamic of who you're trying to sell to, engage with, and kind of build loyalty with long-term.
Yeah. I can't think of anything in marketing or sales that is truly dead, right? Inbound is not dead. Advertising is not dead. PR is not dead. Cold calling is not dead. The funnel is certainly not dead. If we had another hour, we could debunk those and any number of other things that people think are dead. I think, bad ways of doing those things are dead.
Right?
Like, thinking that PR is like writing press releases and doing call downs to editors. Maybe that's dead. I can show you bad examples of ABM. I can show you bad examples of content. I can show you bad examples of personas.
Right.
And I can use those to justify the fact that, well, no, look at that. It's clearly dead, right? No, not so much.
Let's start to go down the ABM path a little bit. I mean, I know that it's definitely going to be an interesting trend moving forward. And I forget trend, it's a reality.
Yeah.
But if you're talking to a marketer today that they may not even have an understanding of it, what's your advice?
Counterintuitively, maybe one of the first things I'd recommend is just forget that you've heard of account-based marketing. Go to your sales organization And if they have a target account program, if they have a named account program, if they have named account salespeople, learn everything you can about what they do. Now, don't assume that what they're doing and the way they're doing it is perfect or correct or accurate. I've seen a lot of named account lists created arbitrarily and incorrectly by the wrong criteria, but that's not the point right now. Find out what your organization's already doing and why, right? If there's a named account program, what is it being measured against? What is the impact that's going to have on sales? How would you, if you were to build it from the ground up, how would you create a marketing program that specifically supports the company's named accounts? So again, like let's say you've got 140 companies that you care about, right? Yep. And in each of those companies, like according to CEB, there's 6.8 members of the internal buying committee. So who are the 6 to 7 people? What are the 6 to 7 roles in those companies that you care about?
Right.
How would you build a pipeline of those, right? That's probably not writing a bunch of blog posts and waiting for them to come to Google. Now, there may be some of that. You may still have content you're creating that has a residual impact on Google, but is targeted at one of those 6 or 7 roles in those bigger companies. But if you simply isolated yourself and said, I need to drive more revenue impact on the named account program my sales team has, how do I do that? And then more importantly, how do we do that together, right? Because that named account, you know, if nothing else, account-based marketing, I hate that it's called marketing because it's really a cross-functional effort. It is a coordinated approach between sales and marketing to drive consensus among that more complex internal buying committee. So doing account-based marketing effectively isn't about different campaigns. In some cases, it's about coordinating a message and a process between sales and marketing, and in some cases, enabling sales with that more precise message for them to be more effective in driving engagement with those target accounts.
So then if you look at it from the standpoint of what a marketer's faced with and what a sales individual is faced with or department, a salesperson's got to be able to tell a great story as they're going in to try to sell. A marketer's got to be able to sell that story better, right? I mean, it's like...
It's a great way to think about it. I mean, I think those lines are blurring, right? And nowhere are they blurring faster and more directly than in sort of account-based marketing right now, where I think marketers are thinking about their role more in the line of what traditional salespeople have done. You know, I see a lot of marketing organizations that are now taking ownership of inside sales, where marketers are being asked to be responsible not for marketing qualified leads, but sales qualified leads. And so to be able to do that, they're taking lead qualification in-house.
Yeah.
They're taking the BDRs, the business development reps, that are qualifying leads into appointments for senior sales reps and saying, okay, marketing, you now own that. That's scary. And, you know, marketing salespeople is a whole different animal than managing marketing managers. So there's a skill set and a learning curve involved there. But strategically, it's probably the right approach, because now you're not only aligning marketing with a metric that sales cares about, but you're blurring that line even further between what sales and marketing does and putting them both more in line with what really matters. If you look at sort of the comprehensive best practice ABM programs that are starting to emerge today, and you try to launch that next month, you will probably be unsuccessful. Find the starting points. And the starting points could be, okay, who are the right target accounts? It may not be who sales has identified. It may be what are the firmographic details and what are the characteristics of accounts that we care about. Okay, step 2, in those accounts, who are the 6 to 7 people that we care about? Who are the roles? Who are the decision makers, the influencers, the stakeholders that we need to engage with? Do we know who they are? Do we have a list of them? Are we having any conversation with them today? I mean, like, these are sort of starting points that are both foundational building blocks of the program, as well as things that operationally, tactically, sales and marketing can get going and go work on. Right. So those may feel like sort of rudimentary elements, but most organizations haven't gotten that far, and you got to do that first anyway.
Anything else that we're kind of not addressing that you felt like maybe we should be kind of talking about here? Some of the other trends you may be looking at as we head into 2017?
Yeah, I mean, the other couple of things that I think about, one is just attribution. I mean, we talked about how marketing is getting a lot more complicated, and so understanding what's working and what's not, weighting certain campaigns and certain touch points more than others is becoming increasingly important. There's some great tools in the market that'll assist with that for B2B marketers. I think intent is more important than precision right now. Knowing that, this is not transactional, knowing that, this is a process that involves multiple touch points, seen and unseen. Being able to do planning around just based on that intent is important. I also think, B2B companies that don't have a big data strategy are going to increasingly sort of fall behind. being able to leverage data outside of what you capture yourself, buying signals and indicators and triggers that happen from your target companies and those prospects within them, and using that to reprioritize not only who you engage, but how you engage with them. That is becoming more and more mainstream, more and more accessible to marketers. And it adds a level of complexity from an execution standpoint, but I think the precision and the conversion impact that we've seen makes it well worth it. And look, this stuff isn't easy. It's only getting more difficult. And I feel like half the time when I go talk to people about sort of modern marketing, they're looking for me to sort of say, well, it seems hard, but no, it's really easy. And here's how you do it. It's never going to be that way ever again, if it ever was. So I think, this is a journey. And I think, for marketers that if we were to have this conversation a year from now with marketers that sort of took first steps in ABM and maybe started to do some better attribution work, they would still feel behind and confused and overwhelmed in 12 months and 24 months. That's just the nature of the beast. But I think, you can do crazy making and you can say, well, I don't understand that, so I'm just going to go improve open rates in my emails over here and hope that does it. If you just stick with what you know and without prioritizing those efforts, you're gonna be more frustrated because you're probably gonna be out of a job.
Hey, Matt, I've totally appreciated the conversation this morning. I thought it's really helpful. Thanks for your time. We'll make sure we follow back up with you and stay in touch. But I'm sure everybody here is going to really appreciate your insight and advice.
Sounds good. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Matt.